February 9, 1962, was supposed to mark a somber occasion, a day of mourning, reflection, and respect for one of the most notorious figures in organized crime history, Lucky Luciano. The streets of New York were unusually quiet that morning, a rare stillness that hinted at the tension simmering beneath the surface. Inside the church, more than 2,000 mourners had gathered, men who had built empires through power, fear, and carefully maintained alliances. Politicians, lawmen, and businessmen mingled quietly among the families of gangsters, each aware that they were witnessing history. On the surface, it appeared to be a peaceful funeral, a final farewell to a man whose influence had stretched across the country and even beyond its borders. But appearances were deceiving. Funerals in the Mafia world were rarely just about honoring the dead. They were strategic gatherings where alliances were tested, rivalries were quietly measured, and power was constantly being recalibrated. Each person in attendance was calculating. Each gesture and word weighed for its implications. In such an environment, even a simple act of mourning carried with it layers of unspoken intentions. Every step, every handshake, every glance held the potential for danger, for betrayal, for an unexpected turn of events that could change the balance of power. It was in this charged atmosphere that Carlo Gambino, one of the most cautious and intelligent figures in organized crime, chose to walk in. Gambino, by reputation alone, was a man who understood the stakes of every situation, a man who never underestimated the ambition of others or the lengths to which they might go to achieve their goals. Yet even the most careful and calculated men could find themselves vulnerable when the symbolism of the moment outweighed caution. The funeral of Lucky Luciano was not merely a personal loss, it was a gathering of the most powerful men in organized crime. It was a statement of continuity, a show of unity, and, at the same time, a perfect stage for anyone with ambition to make their move. For the spectators, it was a chance to pay respects, to be seen in the right circles, to reinforce their positions within the complex hierarchy of the Mafia. For those plotting in the shadows, it was an opportunity, a moment when focus could be divided and vulnerabilities exploited. Carlo Gambino, knowing all this, had to navigate not only the presence of friends and allies, but also the invisible web of threats and rivalries that stretched across the room. He entered the church aware that danger might be closer than he imagined, yet he walked with a calm, composed demeanor that had become his signature, a mask of tranquility that concealed a mind constantly analyzing, calculating, and preparing for contingencies. The mourners themselves, oblivious to the hidden tensions, participated in the rituals of mourning. They sang hymns, offered prayers, and shared memories. Yet beneath the quiet whispers, the nervous shifting of feet, and the furtive glances, the atmosphere was heavy with expectation and unspoken fear. Outside the church, the city went about its daily business, unaware that inside, history was being written not by what was spoken, but by what was silently planned. The funeral was a confluence of generations, of reputations, of grudges and alliances that spanned decades. Each man, each woman present was aware, in their own way, that this gathering could shape the future of organized crime in America. In such a context, the presence of 12 hidden guns, the careful positioning of potential assassins, and the timing of their plan became a subtle undercurrent of danger, invisible to the untrained eye, yet palpable to those who knew how to read it. To the average observer, the day may have appeared uneventful, a solemn tribute to a man whose life had left an indelible mark on the world of crime. But to those who understood the stakes, every gesture, every movement, and every interaction carried meaning. Gambino, walking among them, was aware of the unspoken rules, aware that even the safest spaces could conceal lethal intent. The tension was a living thing, filling the room in waves, a silent predator stalking the unaware. It was the kind of day when ordinary caution was insufficient, when instinct had to guide every decision, and when the smallest misstep could have catastrophic consequences. The funeral, in essence, was a battlefield disguised as a place of mourning, a stage upon which the most audacious plots could unfold. And on this day, Carlo Gambino was at its center, a figure of calm amidst a sea of danger, unaware that every eye that did not meet his, every gesture that seemed innocuous, was part of a larger game of survival and power. As the ceremony continued, the contrast between the outward appearance of mourning and the hidden currents of ambition and danger became starkly apparent. The very air seemed charged with anticipation, as though the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash that might erupt at any moment. For Gambino, and for those who knew the depth of threat that surrounded him, it was a test not only of courage, but of awareness, of foresight, of the ability to perceive the invisible forces at work in a room filled with men who had perfected the art of deception. And as he moved through the crowd, acknowledging old friends and competitors alike, he did so with a measured grace, each step calculated, each glance purposeful, as though understanding that in this room, the boundaries between mourning and opportunity, thank you, were indistinguishably blurred. What history would later remember as a quiet funeral was, in truth, a crucible of danger, a moment when a single miscalculation could have rewritten the fate of the most powerful crime families in America. And it was in this crucible, amid the rituals and formalities of mourning, that the subtle, almost imperceptible signs of impending danger were already in motion, laying the foundation for events that would forever mark this day as more than just a farewell to a man, but as a pivotal moment in the deadly intricate game of organized crime. Vito Genovese was a man who had once commanded respect, fear, and absolute loyalty, a figure whose name alone could silence a room. But by February of 1962, he was confined behind the cold, unyielding walls of a prison cell, stripped of his freedom and his immediate control over the empire he had built with cunning, violence, and ambition. From the outside, it might have seemed that his influence had waned, that the man who once orchestrated the movements of New York's most powerful crime families was now powerless, reduced to counting the days within the gray monotony of prison life. Yet those who truly understood the nature of Vito Genovese knew that confinement could not contain him. His mind remained sharp, his ambition undiminished, and his reach still extended far beyond the walls and bars that sought to restrain him. The prison had not broken him, it had refined him, forcing him to adapt, to communicate indirectly, and to rely on the loyalty of those still operating in the outside world to carry out his will. From within that cell, Genovese devised a plan that was audacious, daring, and as dangerous as it was precise. He had one singular objective: Carlo Gambino. In Genovese's mind, Gambino was not only an obstacle, he was a symbol of everything Genovese had lost, the embodiment of a rival, who had outmaneuvered him at every turn. Killing Gambino would not just remove a threat, it would serve as a dramatic reassertion of power, a declaration that Genovese's authority could not be ignored, even from behind bars. And so, the plan was conceived. It had to be perfect. There would be no room for error, no margin for hesitation, no second chances. Genovese could not act himself, so he relied on men he trusted, men who had proven their loyalty, their skill, and their willingness to commit acts that others might shy away from. 12 hitmen were chosen, carefully selected for their discipline, patience, and ability to blend into the crowd. They were ordinary men to the untrained eye, but each carried concealed weapons, each knew the timing of the strike, each was ready to execute a plan that would forever change the landscape of organized crime in America. The target was not hidden, not by circumstance, but by the symbolism of the occasion itself. Lucky Luciano's funeral was the perfect setting. It would gather nearly every major figure from every crime family, a public stage where the presence of Carlo Gambino could be exploited. The audacity of the plan lay not only in its precision but in its timing, to strike in public, in a place of mourning, in front of thousands who would witness both the act and its consequences. In Genovese's mind, it was theater, a demonstration of control and cunning that would cement his legacy, even from the confines of prison. The logistics were meticulously arranged. Every hitman had a role, every movement rehearsed in advance. Their weapons were hidden beneath coats, their paths calculated to avoid detection until the precise moment of execution. The shooters waited for the signal, for the right instant when Gambino would be most vulnerable, unaware that the very plan they had perfected was already being unraveled in silence. Despi. The careful construction of the plot, it relied on a single assumption, that Gambino and his allies would be unprepared, that no one would anticipate such brazen audacity. Genovese believed in the certainty of his own design, in the inevitability of his revenge. He had confidence in his men, confidence in his strategy, and confidence that the threads of loyalty and fear he had woven would hold firm. But even the most flawless plan can falter when it encounters a mind equally sharp, equally vigilant, and capable of seeing what others cannot. The contrast between Genovese's imprisonment and his still potent influence highlights the paradox of power in the Mafia world. Even without physical freedom, a man like Genovese could orchestrate events with deadly precision, demonstrating that control was as much about vision and manipulation as it was about muscle and proximity. Every day behind bars was a study in patience, a test of influence, and a lesson in the limits of human foresight. Yet for all his brilliance, Genovese had overlooked a critical variable, an element that would transform his meticulously laid plan into a failure. In his calculation, he had underestimated the ability of a single observant man to detect the patterns, anticipate the timing, and quietly intervene without confrontation. That man, Bumpy Johnson, would become the unseen force that turned Genovese's ambition into futility. Genovese's obsession with Gambino had blinded him to the subtleties of human intelligence, to the possibility that foresight could counter brute planning, and that awareness could neutralize even the most disciplined strike team. The narrative of Genovese's plot is a testament to the enduring tension between planning and perception, between ambition and awareness. While Genovese's mind conceived an intricate web of lethal precision, the reality of human vigilance, adaptability, thank you, and intuition would ultimately redefine the outcome. His plan, flawless on paper, could not account for the quiet genius of a man who saw the invisible, anticipated the hidden, and acted with the subtlety that true power demands. And so, the funeral approached, a day that was meant to witness both mourning and a masterful act of vengeance. Every detail had been arranged to perfection by Genovese, yet the shadow of an unseen protector loomed, ready to ensure that the audacity of revenge would never materialize. The contrast between the prison-bound mastermind and the free-acting observer would soon become the defining story of that day, a narrative that underscored a timeless truth, that power is not only about the ability to act, but about the foresight to anticipate, the intelligence to perceive, and the courage to intervene before the moment of reckoning arrives. While everyone else at Lucky Luciano's funeral was focused on the solemnity of the occasion, Bumpy Johnson's attention was focused entirely elsewhere, where the mourners saw black coats, lowered heads, and tear-streaked faces. Bumpy saw patterns, anomalies, and signs of danger. To most men, the funeral was a gathering, a ritual, a chance to pay respects. To Bumpy, it was a battlefield disguised as a cathedral, a place where appearances were deceiving, and where a single misstep could mean death. For weeks leading up to the event, he had been moving quietly, like a shadow slipping between cracks, observing, learning, and understanding. He knew that in the world of organized crime, information was the most lethal weapon of all. And on that day, Bumpy had gathered more intelligence than most could hope to obtain in a lifetime. He noticed subtle changes in the funeral arrangements, seating charts that seemed innocuous to the casual observer but were in fact carefully designed to create vulnerabilities. He observed faces among the staff that did not belong, men whose eyes betrayed the purpose of their presence. These were not mourners, they were predators waiting for the perfect moment. Bumpy understood immediately what they were planning. 12 hitmen, carefully chosen, disciplined, and armed, had been placed strategically within the church. Their orders were precise: eliminate Carlo Gambino in front of the assembled crime families of America. The audacity of such a plan was breathtaking, even by Mafia standards. It was a public execution, an attempt to send a message to anyone who dared oppose Vito Genovese's empire, a demonstration of control from behind prison walls. But Bumpy had never been a man to rely solely on instinct. He acted methodically, deliberately, and with the patience of someone who understood that the smallest error could compromise everything. For 3 weeks, he infiltrated the funeral preparations quietly, unnoticed, manipulating the environment without raising suspicion. He moved seats, adjusted sightlines, and subtly altered arrangements in ways that would later seem inconsequential, but were, in reality, pivotal. Each adjustment, each minor interference, was designed to disrupt the perfect timing that the hitmen had rehearsed over and over. The killers believed that their plan was foolproof. They had no idea that Bumpy was already steps ahead, that the moment they had been anticipating had already been stripped of its inevitability. The genius of Bumpy's strategy was in its subtlety. He did not confront the assassins directly, did not draw attention to his awareness. Instead, he worked quietly, invisibly, manipulating variables that no one else considered. By the time the shooters realized that their calculations had been thrown off, it was already too late. Bumpy's interventions ensured that the angles, the timing, and the positions, all critica to the execution of the plan, were compromised beyond recovery. Gambino, walking into the church with calm confidence, remained completely unaware of how close he had come to death. Every step he took, every handshake he exchanged, was observed by men who would have killed him in an instant had Bumpy not intervened. The room, filled with powerful figures, was a tinderbox of ambition, rivalry, and hidden threats. In such a volatile environment, even the slightest miscalculation could spark violence. Yet Bumpy navigated this chaos with the precision of a master strategist, a man whose reputation for intelligence and foresight had been earned through years of experience on the streets and in the corridors of power. The funeral itself was a lesson in contrasts. On the surface, it was a traditional ceremony, filled with mourning, hymns, and somber ritual. Beneath that veneer, however, it was an arena where life and death were balanced on a knife's edge, where loyalty and betrayal coexisted, and where a single man's perception could determine the outcome. Bumpy Johnson's awareness, his ability to see what others could not, transformed a potential massacre into a controlled, tension-filled event that passed without incident. It was a demonstration of the difference between brute force and intelligence, between the willingness to act blindly and the ability to anticipate and prevent. The hitmen, disciplined and ready, found themselves powerless, their meticulously rehearsed plans rendered ineffective by interventions they never noticed until it was too late. Bumpy had not drawn a weapon, he had not raised an alarm. Instead, he had used observation, insight, and careful manipulation to protect Gambino, to neutralize a threat, and to maintain the delicate balance of power in a world where miscalculations were fatal. This episode illustrates a profound truth about the nature of power and influence. The most effective form of control is often invisible. It is not always the man with the largest gun, the most ruthless reputation, or the loudest threats who shapes outcomes. Sometimes it is the quiet, perceptive, and intelligent individual, acting without recognition, whose decisions ripple through events and determine who lives, who dies, and who ultimately holds power. By the time the funeral concluded, the threat had dissipated, but its presence had been deeply felt by those who understood what could have occurred. Gambino emerged unscathed, largely unaware of the danger he had narrowly avoided. The hitmen retreated, their mission foiled not by confrontation but by foresight, and Bumpy Johnson, who had moved in silence, solidified his reputation as a man who could read situations with unparalleled clarity, who could anticipate threats, and whose strategic thinking could outmaneuver even the most disciplined adversaries. In the world of organized crime, such moments are rare, but their impact is lasting. The events of that day did more than save a life. They reshaped the understanding of power, demonstrating that intelligence, observation, and anticipation often outweigh aggression and brute force. Bumpy's actions ensured not only Gambino's safety but also the preservation of a fragile order within the Mafia hierarchy, proving that true power is as much about foresight and control as it is about fear and intimidation. In the end, the funeral became more than a tribute to the dead. It became a testament to the living, a story of strategy, perception, and the unseen hand that protects and directs events in ways that most will never witness but will always remember in their consequences. When the funeral ended, the church doors closed behind the mourners, and the crowd dispersed into the cold February air. It was easy for anyone observing from the outside to assume that the day had passed without incident. From the perspective of the average bystander, it had been a typical funeral, somber, orderly, and marked by ritual. Yet those who understood the underworld knew that the real story of that day had never been about mourning. It was about power, strategy, and survival. The absence of violence was not a sign of safety. It was the result of a single individual's foresight, calculation, and mastery over human behavior. Carlo Gambino walked out alive, unscathed, yet the life he carried forward was the product of someone seeing the invisible, anticipating threats before they materialized, and quietly manipulating circumstances to neutralize danger. Bumpy Johnson had turned a potential massacre into a masterclass in strategy, demonstrating a truth that resonates far beyond the confines of organized crime. Real power is not measured by the ability to strike, but by the ability to perceive, anticipate, and act before a threat becomes a reality. In the world of the Mafia, where loyalty is fragile and ambition deadly, the ability to anticipate a rival's move is more valuable than any weapon, more critical than any army. Bumpy's interventions were subtle, almost imperceptible, yet their impact was profound. He had moved seats, shifted sightlines, and subtly altered the environment in ways that ensured the success of the plan would be impossible without anyone realizing it. There was no confrontation, no dramatic showdown, no gunfire. The audacity of the assassins was neutralized by intelligence and foresight, not violence. The contrast between the potential for chaos and the calm that followed underscored a powerful reality. Control is often invisible, and its effects are measured not in spectacle but in outcomes. When the would-be assassins realized that the plan had failed, the moment of revelation was irrelevant. The opportunity had passed. Bumpy had already won by ensuring that their meticulously prepared scheme could not succeed. The implications of his actions went far beyond protecting Carlo Gambino's life. By neutralizing the threat, he preserved the fragile equilibrium among the crime families, prevented a potentially catastrophic power vacuum, and reinforced the understanding that intelligence could outmatch force even in the deadliest of arenas. That day also redefined the perception of power within the underworld. Gambino, though unaware of the full extent of what had been done to save him, walked out with his position intact and his reputation enhanced. He remained a dominant force, but the quiet protection afforded by Bumpy Johnson was a reminder that even the most powerful men are vulnerable when their adversaries are unseen and their threats calculated. Bumpy's actions illustrated another vital principle, that anticipation, patience, and subtle manipulation can be far more effective than confrontation. Where the gunmen relied on timing, force, and surprise, Bumpy relied on observation, intellect, and strategic action. By the time the plan collapsed, he had already ensured that Gambino's life was secure. In doing so, he had demonstrated a mastery of human behavior, understanding not just what people intended to do, but how they thought, how they moved, and how they could be influenced without their knowledge. The lesson extended beyond the immediate danger. In an environment as unpredictable and ruthless as organized crime, foresight becomes a form of armor, a tool for survival, and a weapon more reliable than any firearm. Bumpy's ability to see patterns, anticipate outcomes, and manipulate situations invisibly turned potential disaster into a display of silent control. This day, forever etched in the annals of Mafia history, serves as a testament to the enduring power of strategic thinking. It reminds us that the most effective form of leadership is often unseen, that influence is measured not by the loudness of action, but by the precision of intervention. Bumpy Johnson's reputation was solidified through this singular event. He became known not just as a man of courage or street wisdom, but as a master strategist, someone whose mind could anticipate danger and neutralize it without the use of overt violence. His legacy demonstrates that true authority comes from understanding, perception, and the ability to act decisively in ways others cannot perceive. Beyond the immediate world of organized crime, this story carries lessons that transcend its context. It is a reminder that preparation, observation, and insight can outweigh aggression, that the ability to anticipate threats and intervene preemptively can prevent crises before they occur, and that the most effective power is often invisible, subtle, and precise. When the mourners left, when the coffin was lowered, and when the candles flickered in the chill of the February air, the drama that could have unfolded remained a silent secret, known only to a few. Gambino lived to continue his rise, Genovese's plot failed, and the balance of power was preserved. All of it was the result of one man seeing what others could not, acting without recognition, and shaping the outcome of history from the shadows. The day, then, was not about death. It was about life, survival, and the demonstration of intelligence as the ultimate form of power. For Bumpy Johnson, it was a moment that solidified his role as a guardian of strategy, a man whose perception could protect lives, shift balances, and outmaneuver even the most audacious plans. In retrospect, the funeral is remembered not for the man in the coffin, but for the unseen protector, the strategist whose quiet actions ensured that the drama of revenge never played out. It is a story of foresight, triumphing over force, intelligence prevailing over ambition, and the subtle hand of a master strategist shaping the course of events in ways that few could ever fully appreciate. And in that triumph, a timeless lesson emerges. True power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the ability to anticipate, to intervene, and to ensure survival in a world where every misstep can be fatal.